So yeah, this is our, first session in the portfolio workshop series. It's the introduction to building a portfolio. I'm Stephanie. I'm a recent UBalt grad working as a user researcher at Autodesk. And co-presenting with me is Bethany. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So yes, I'm Bethany. I am also a recent graduate of the IDIA program, and I'm currently the outreach coordinator for the Center of Digital Communication, Commerce, and Culture. This presentation, we're really excited to share it with you because it is the result of hours of research and just personal exploration into best practices, things that Stephanie and I wish that we had known when we were in the program. So we are really excited to be able to share this with you guys tonight.
Awesome. And with that, yeah, let's get started. Maybe. Maybe. Awesome. So what will you get out of this workshop series? So we've kind of put together this three-part series to help you, start to put together a portfolio. So we're planning to give you, general portfolio best practices, help you, figure out how to create a portfolio and case study. We'll be focusing a little bit on overall portfolio strategy with some technical guidance. And then we'll be, facilitating a workshop space tailored to your career path and, whatever stage of portfolio development that you're at currently. So this is really just an overview of the entire series. So this first session, the one that we're, currently in, is Introduction to Building a Portfolio. And then the other two sessions will be focused on, reviewing a case study, and then, eventually reviewing the entirety of your portfolio. But before we get started, we do have just a quick poll. There's just three quick questions. The first is really to understand, what career path you're either already in or you're currently pursuing. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a minute to let us know. Awesome. So it looks like, wow, we have a lot of researchers in the room. That's awesome to hear, or to see rather. Yeah, so it looks like 6 of you are interested in research. 4 is interested in design. 1 person's interested in UX writing or content design, and then we have a few who are interested in other fields outside of those. That's awesome. The second question is if you already have a portfolio in progress or are starting from scratch. Awesome. So it looks like only 1 of you already have a portfolio in progress and the other ones are starting from scratch. That's totally fine. That's exactly why we're here. And then our last question is if you already have a case study written or if you are currently working on a case study or don't have one written. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, it looks like no one has one yet, and that again, that's totally fine because we have a lot of content around that we're going to be reviewing in a bit. So yeah, our agenda is really simple for today. So we'll go over the basics of a portfolio. Then we'll go over how to make a case study and what types of content you may want to include. We'll talk briefly about the different tools you can use to create a case study and a portfolio. And then we'll spend the second half of the session assembling, our personal case studies. We have, the second part of the session dedicated to actually starting to kind of create a case study. So we'll have each of you take a project that you're interested in, and then we'll, be able to start that process during this time as well. Do you have any questions before we get started? Okay, awesome. And if you wouldn't mind, if there are any questions that come up during this part of the session, either keep them until the end, or you're welcome to utilize the chat feature and we'll answer them when we see them. Awesome. So let's just dive into the portfolio overview. So what is a portfolio? A portfolio is a collection of projects or work samples from your past experiences that demonstrate your skills and abilities. Portfolio helps to set you apart from other candidates by showing your unique skill sets. It can be a website or a PDF, and oftentimes it's probably both or some combination of the two. But it truly depends on the audience, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. And then all the jobs that I've seen will ask for your portfolio or website when applying for a position. So it's an important tool to have when going through the application process. Now going into like who's my audience. Typically your portfolio is for a recruiter, hiring team, or manager. You might have a portfolio for freelance clients if you're going the freelance contract route. And that's, typically so that they can kind of see the work that you've done in the past. But for the purposes of, this session, we're really kind of focused on the recruiter, hiring team, or manager as your audience during the application process. So what are hiring managers looking for? They always look for how you produce real value or impact in your project. So impact is something that's really, really important to, show in your case study and your portfolios. They look to understand why you made the decisions that you did in both design and research. And then they want to know the process you took to get to the end result. So for example, depending on the field that you're interested in, think design explorations, quick sketches, or even, stakeholder workshops, or like showcasing part of your synthesis process. These are all elements that, kind of show your process and show the thinking behind some of the work that you've done. But it's important to keep in mind that your portfolio is a UX project. And with this UX project, we want to make sure that we're considering our users. So, I know we mentioned that the hiring manager and the recruiter are going to be the primary people that are, viewing your portfolio, but maybe there are some instances where there's other team members or, other people apart from those mentioned that will look at your work. So that's something that you definitely want to, consider. Know that, this process is very, very iterative. I can't tell you how many iterations it took me to finally get to a good place with my portfolio. Don't get discouraged. It is what it is. I think that the best things happen in iteration. And it's important to understand that done is better than perfect. There is no such thing as perfect when it comes to a portfolio or really anything in life. And your portfolio evolves as you evolve. And it's a living artifact that's meant to be updated. So done is, don't wait for perfection, just get it done. And it'll continue to evolve as you get more experience. And if you haven't had much experience or don't have many projects to pull from, that's totally okay. We have, ideas we'll share later on in the presentation as to how you could either get more experience or, things of that nature. So, but with that, I'll pass it over to Bethany to go through Case Studies 101.
Awesome. So as Stephanie mentioned, a portfolio is a collection of work samples or case studies. Creating an entire portfolio could be an overwhelming process. I know I've been there. So we're going to zoom in and just start by walking you through how to create a piece of a portfolio tonight, which is the case study. So when we talk about curating your case studies, you might think it's a good idea to showcase all of your experience by including every single one of your projects. This is actually a bad idea. You want to focus on quality over quantity by including only 3 to 5 of your best projects and the ones that you feel are the best reflection of you and your abilities. So these can be projects you've done at work or an internship, school projects, or volunteer projects. I'd say some ideal projects would be ones that you've done for real clients. You want to try to limit conceptual projects if you can. Projects where you've worked with cross-functional teams are great, and hiring managers love that. I've had them ask me specifically about my experience working with cross-functional teams and how I can demonstrate that in my own projects. And products that have actually shipped, if you've had experience with that, are also great to include case studies on. So as you're thinking through the projects you've worked on, some questions to ask yourself to guide yourself in selecting these projects are, what are you really good at? Which UX activities do you really like to do? What differentiates you from other candidates and makes you unique as a designer or researcher? And which projects did you bring the most value to the project and to the organization and your team? Which projects show the most tangible impact of your work? And from which projects did you learn the most? This is also something that hiring managers really like to see. Finally, are there any projects that directly relate to the type of job or industry that you are seeking to be in? It's really great if you can tailor your portfolio to that. Remember to keep your portfolio updated as you complete new projects in your program and your career. And you're going to want to make sure that you pay special attention to periodically capturing important data on these projects to make sure that you have the information you'll need to add to your portfolio later. As you're creating your case studies, remember that you are creating them for a hiring manager who will specifically be looking for these different things: the types of design and or research you've done, how you approach problems and challenges, how you deliver results, and your overall process. Now you can see here, we have broken that down into 3 essential components that you're going to rely on to demonstrate these things. So the first one is your content. I would generally classify this as the who, what, when, and where of your projects. Next is storytelling. So how and why of your project. How did you approach problems and why did you make the decisions that you did? Lastly is the visual presentation and design. So there's obviously going to be a lot of overlap between these 3 things, but for the sake of simplicity, this is the framework that we're going to use to guide our process tonight. When creating your case study, we're going to start by discussing some content, or the content portion, because content is really the foundation of your case studies. While it's tempting to jump ahead into focusing on how your portfolio looks, I know I myself have been guilty of that. If your content isn't solid, it really doesn't matter how it looks. So before you spend time deliberating over what layout or fonts or graphics you want to use, you really need to prioritize the content itself. And a practical tip that I would recommend using is to start by creating your case study in a Google Doc. Don't focus on the website. Don't focus on creating a pretty slide deck. Just focus on writing it out. And you can also include visual artifacts in this doc if you want to, but really focus on the writing the content, and the storytelling. So this is going to help make sure that your writing is clear and compelling. And also, just on a practical level, it's going to help you keep everything organized and will make it a whole lot easier when you're ready to migrate this information into a website or a slide deck versus trying to just type everything into a web tool or whatever. So eventually, also, as you transition your written case studies to something more visual, this process will also help you to kind of edit them down and consider how you can convey some of this text visually. All right, so where do we start with figuring out what kind of content to include? I'm sure you've worked on a bunch of projects. You have a bunch of stuff to pull from. This is a handy little guide that I have that we'll be sharing with you as well once you guys get the, I think we're going to send out the slides hopefully. But this is something I borrowed from Sarah Duty, who is really has a lot of great resources on how to create a portfolio, also a lot of great professional resources and related to building your UX career. Broken down into a few different components here. We're starting with a strong descriptive case study title. And we have our introduction with the overview, problem statement, users and audience, roles and responsibilities, and scope and constraints. And then we have the process, which is including what happened, what your personal contributions were, which comprises the majority of your case study. And then finally, the conclusion, which includes the outcomes and results of the project. And we're going to dive into each of these a little bit more now. So starting with the introduction, you really need to start by introducing the project to your audience by giving them context. This is a crucial part of framing your narrative to make sure that your readers don't get lost as you take them through this process. You're going to start with a strong descriptive title, as I mentioned before. An example of this might be something like Home Depot user research for mobile app checkout versus something that is a little more weak like Home Depot research. So really aim to be descriptive and specific with your title. You also want to provide an overview of the project and some background information. This is going to include an overview, which would be a quick summary of the company or product. This provides crucial context, and you're going to need to determine how much information your audience needs to understand the problem space and provide just enough detail to make sure that your audience understands the gist of the project scope. Next is a problem statement. So why did this project need to happen? What was the goal or desired outcome? Users and audience would be who your users are. You need to help the reader understand who is actually using this product or service. Next is roles and responsibilities. So what was your role specifically, and what were your personal contributions to this project? You also want to include who else worked on the project, as well as how big the team was. And lastly, scope and constraints. So these would be any unique or limiting factors such as budget, timeline, time zones, etc. So next we have the biggest section of your case study, which is the process. This is a step-by-step rundown of what you did during your project and why you did it. You'll discuss the design approach and research methodologies you used, challenges you encountered along the way, as well as analyses your team performed, insights gained, the whole gamut. And we'll talk more about that momentarily, but this is also going to include things like design artifacts, research artifacts, and I have a list of them here. You don't need to include all of them. In fact, I would recommend not including all of them, but really only including the ones that are most relevant to the story you're trying to tell. So, whether it's a research project, a design project, if it includes both, you'll pick the most compelling parts, most compelling artifacts you have to support the narrative that you are sharing with your reader. Oh, and really quick, sorry, before I move on, I just want to emphasize, you want to include everything in this process that is going to tell your audience just kind of the before and after of the project you did. So your hiring managers, your audience, they don't just want to see like a pretty final project. You want to include everything from the messy sketches at the beginning, the wireframes, to your high fidelity designs at the end. So just keep that in mind. It's really important to showing the process. All right, and lastly, we have the conclusion. So what happened by the end of the project? What goals were achieved? What lessons did you learn personally? And you can also share your findings and recommendations along with the impact of the project. All right, so storytelling is, I would say, just as important as the content. It's something that I see again and again from hiring managers, UX experts. It's something I've heard from mentors personally, emphasizing the aspect of storytelling in your portfolio. And this is important to I'd say any part of your career in UX, but especially with your portfolio. So the way you frame information is just as important, if not more important, than the information itself. because it's what is engaging your reader and bringing them from the start to the finish. So I look at storytelling as more of the why and the how. So when it comes to decisions you made, why did you decide to use certain research methodologies? Why did you decide to make certain design decisions? How did you address the challenges and constraints that you faced in your project? And it's okay that things might not have gone to plan as you went through this project. You might have dealt with unanticipated issues, or you might have had outcomes that weren't what you expected. And that is part of the process. Hiring managers expect this, and they also want to know how you dealt with these things. So you can talk about what you learned from the project, as well as how you might do things differently with the knowledge that you have now. And it's a great opportunity to either, weave these things throughout your case study. You can also include a summary of learnings at the end, whichever works best for you. So within storytelling, there is the component of the impact, which is a really essential part of communicating just what the point of your project was, as well as the outcome. So you want to also share your own personal contributions and the impact of those as well. So this would include metrics, outcomes, how value is created, and there's ways you can think about this. These questions here will guide you along the lines of determining kind of how to communicate that, such as how did your contributions impact the user or the organization and business? How did they impact your team? Did you have specific metrics that you were tracking, such as increased conversion rates or maybe reduced number of user errors, things like that? How did you create value? And sometimes, the impact is a little nebulous. It might be that you might not have specific numbers to share, but you might be able to share a more defined understanding of the problem space, as well as goals for future research to understand the problem space better. A few practicals that I would just encourage you guys to keep in mind is that you don't need to include every single step and detail and artifact from a project. This was something that I personally have had some struggles with. I just want to include everything I did, and I think it's all important, and it's really not. So I just want to encourage everyone to edit ruthlessly, include only what you believe is most relevant to the story you're telling. Secondly, I want to help, maybe some of you guys don't struggle with this, maybe some of you do, but I just want to say that there is a time and place for humility, and this is not it. So your audience will not know what to credit you with unless you are explicit about your personal contributions. So have integrity, but also try to use I statements whenever possible so that they know just what you did to contribute to the project. Lastly, I wasn't sure if I should include this on here because I think using things like ChatGPT can pose some challenges, but I will say that it has helped me a lot with writing more clearly. It's brought a lot of clarity and has helped me make my writing more concise. So I'm going to recommend you use something like ChatGPT to edit your writing, with the caveat that you need to be careful to not lose your unique voice. You don't want to sound like a robot. You don't want to make it sound like ChatGPT has written your portfolio or your case study rather. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to use AI to help enhance your writing, that you still maintain your own unique voice. So lastly, let's talk about the visual design component of your portfolio. And you might be surprised if we save this for last. It is important, but like I said before, content and storytelling are more important. But with that being said, most recruiters and hiring managers only spend a couple of minutes reviewing a portfolio if they don't dismiss it before then due to obvious design or readability issues. So you do need to make sure that you're communicating effectively, including the visual design component. If you're a visual designer, the visual details are especially important. But whether you're a designer or a researcher, your portfolio should include these characteristics. They should be clean, well organized, and have consistency throughout the site. They should demonstrate adherence to UX principles. This might seem obvious, but I have looked at a lot of portfolios, and I have also heard from hiring managers and mentors that this is something that is actually often ignored or at least not prioritized. So, with that being said, you want to make sure that it is user-friendly, accessible, and responsive. Do things like include links to your prototypes so that, if, somebody wants to interact with that, they can. What might be even better than that, cuts out a step, cuts out a click, is by using GIFs of important user flows from your prototype. This is something that I've done, and I've seen it used really effectively with other portfolios, and it just, it helps make things really streamlined for your readers. You also want to make sure your images are high quality, and also make sure you're being selective and thoughtful about the visuals you use to make sure you're telling a story. So like I mentioned before, you don't need to include everything. Don't include every screen of a prototype you designed. Show specific user flows. And if you can support this in multiple ways, for example, using a journey map, a task flow, before and after, low fidelity wireframes to high fidelity prototypes, that's great. Above all, you really want to make it scannable. And by that, I mean, they're going to be like running through these super fast. So you want to make it easy for them to kind of grab the most important things. So to do this, you use concise language, use visuals when you can to enhance your messaging. Make sure you're using a good visual hierarchy with headings and bulleted lists. And then make sure your headings are also strong and descriptive. For example, instead of saying just like overview, maybe say building a home buying app from end to end, resulting in 25% increase in conversion. Or instead of saying research, you can say uncovering how millennials approach home buying. It's a lot more interesting, and it gives them the facts right up front. And lastly, don't forget to show off your personality. That is also important to do. A last tip on visual design is that you want to show and tell. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. Instead of just using text, you want to make sure you're also using visuals. So maybe instead of writing out all the steps to the process you use in a bulleted list, maybe turn it into a graphic. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're not expecting the visuals to communicate everything on their own. They need to enhance your messaging. So something that I've seen is people will sometimes say something like, our team performed affinity mapping, and that's it. Or we used how might we questions to ideate, and then they'll have a picture of a bunch of sticky notes. We've all seen that, but it really doesn't tell your readers anything. So you need to be sure to be specific with your writing and the visuals you use to support this. So instead of doing those general headings, maybe talk about what some of the patterns you notice and the insights you gained, or what problems you identified through the affinity mapping, or, different design activities that you did. And Mitchell Clements, I cited him here. He's a really good person to follow on LinkedIn, and he has some great resources for practicals that you can incorporate into your portfolio. All right, we're going to talk about tactical information and tools now, because I'm sure you guys are curious about that. So website versus PDF. This is a hot debate. I don't totally know exactly where I land. Personally, I like using a website and a PDF. And like Stephanie said, there's definitely reasons to use each depending on the time, the situation, your budget even. If you are getting interviews, you will most likely need a PDF. And so you may want to start there, just because building a website can take a lot of time. Even if you're good with websites, it's still a time-consuming process. So if you have to choose one or the other, you might want to start with a PDF. If you do have time building a website, and we'll go through some options, some platforms that you can use to do that, that can be a really great idea. I have a website. I've also done PDFs, and I've needed both for my personal job search. And by the way, when I say PDF, it doesn't just have to be like, an Adobe PDF. You can use a lot of different things such as Figma or Canva, depending on your preferences to create your slide deck. But as Stephanie mentioned before, a website is going to be primarily used by recruiters, hiring managers, freelance clients, whereas a PDF will be more during the interview stage, but can also be used for recruiters, hiring managers, and freelance clients if you so choose. So here I have a list of some portfolio tools that I would recommend. Some of them I use personally. We have some different options for web platforms if you do choose to go that route. These are some of the most popular ones, and you can see there's some differences in how user-friendly they are, the costs, and just something to keep in mind if you are choosing to have a web-based portfolio, there will most likely be a recurring monthly fee, so just factor that in. Whereas if you use something like a PDF approach through Canva or Figma, or, however you want to approach that, you can have a free option. The benefits also, just to mention, of doing a PDF-based portfolio, along with cost and time savings, is that it can allow a degree of customization per client, or per job that you're applying to, that you wouldn't be able to do necessarily with a website. So that is like the one thing that to me makes a PDF portfolio potentially more compelling, although I'm not going to give up my website because I spent a lot of time on it. But if you do decide to go that route, just keep that in mind, that you can easily change the types of projects that you include in a PDF portfolio versus a web-based portfolio. And then also know that at the end of the day, like, you will most likely need a PDF portfolio either way, and that might just be a good way to start. Okay, some tips to create and elevate your portfolio. And I guess for most of you, it's creating. One of you, it's elevating. But I would imagine that there may be a need for gaining more experience to gain more projects for your portfolio at this point. I know that in the IDIA program, we are able to do a lot of great projects, but there might be a need to build on that. I highly recommend, if you're able to, seeking out internships. If that's not something you're able to do, or in addition to that, there are a lot of professional development and pro bono groups that you can get involved in that bridge the gap from, academia to, getting that professional role, because you need experience to get experience. And it's that really tough cycle that a lot of us can find ourselves in. Joining something like Tech Fleet or UX Rescue can give you access to projects that you get to actually work with cross-functional teams with. And this is cool. Tech Fleet it's a growing organization. I have been somewhat involved in it, but they actually were started by someone who was in the IDIA program years ago. So that is a really cool, cool fact. Also, if you're working full-time right now, I would suggest getting creative and just looking for opportunities within your current position. Find ways to exercise your UX skills, find projects, volunteer for whatever you can to build those skills and to potentially build a case study in your current job, and then you'll get paid for it too. Also, friends, family, and local businesses can be a great option to find opportunities to work on projects as well. Next, just finding inspiration for how to refine your portfolio and make it its best. I would recommend LinkedIn, Dribbble, and just Googling best UX portfolios. Like, I've looked at so many portfolios, and it really helped me kind of fine tune my own approach. Everybody is borrowing from everybody else's design, so don't feel like you can't gain some inspiration from someone else. Also, make sure you're making it your own, but I think there's a lot of great resources out there. Just, you got to find it. And then lastly, you do want to get feedback on your portfolio as much as you can. You're not going to know everything up front, and you don't know what you don't know. So a great place to start, I think, is ADP List. That is a free resource where you can just connect with professionals that are already doing UX design, UX research. There's a lot of different disciplines that they cover, and you can just sign up to meet with someone and get portfolio feedback, resume feedback, all that stuff. And it's a really great community to just get that mentorship that you might not otherwise have access to. And I've used that a lot with refining my own portfolio, and I've just found the nicest people there, and they're just super helpful and eager to help you be better and answer questions you have. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about that. Also recommend reaching out to network through LinkedIn and other groups as well. So yeah, that is my portion, and Stephanie is going to cover some things now.
Awesome. Yes, so for next steps in this portfolio series, between now and our next workshop, which is probably going to be held sometime in late April, we want you to complete at least one case study with no design elements, except if you want to include some of the design and or research artifacts you're kind of planning to include in that specific case study. That's totally fine. But come to the next session kind of with, a write-up and whatever design artifacts that you're planning to include in that specific case study. And we'll do a review. And don't worry if you're not able to get super far, that's totally fine. Just come with what you have. And if you are able to get far, then even better, we'll be able to, kind of help you a little bit more. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, questions. I wanted to pause here, ask if there's any questions. I know Sarah has a question in the chat that we'll get to, and we can actually answer that now while everyone else is thinking if they have any questions. Sarah, I invite you to come off mute and kind of give us a little bit more context behind your question if you're feeling up to it.
Sure. Let me see if I can turn on my camera. There we
How
go.
are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I know that we've done a lot of really great work in our program, and sometimes people want to put things that we've created into their portfolios, but it doesn't feel like it's like ready for that yet. It might have been something that needs to go through more review and because we only have a certain amount of time to complete projects when we're working on them in the semester. And I wondered if you had any suggestions for how to address that situation and say, no, I'd rather not have my name on this thing that we put together super quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. Greg might have some insights. I think I can kind of start by answering this question a little bit. I think it kind of depends. I think, as to your point, these group projects, everyone's kind of doing like a certain role. And if you're saying that, the project as, a whole is something that you're not super proud of, or you don't think that it's ready to be shared, then yes, I think I agree with your, thought about, potentially asking your team to remove your name from it. But if you're more so talking about, hey, I developed something very specific for this project. This was my role. These were, the designs that I contributed. And I don't really feel super comfortable having, the team share that in their portfolios, then yeah, I think a discussion should be had. But I wanted to loop in Greg to see if he has any other thoughts, or maybe I'm approaching that
have you had that
differently
happen in the workplace, where like how do you address that when you're working on like a work project too?
I think for work it's a little bit different. Luckily I have not had that experience happen, but I think at least the places that I've worked at, the culture has always been like, if you're ready to share your work, go for it. And we have like very informal design crits where, people will be able to share like really, really like conceptual sketches and kind of get some feedback based on that. So I think it's a little bit different. It's not exactly, I wouldn't say it's similar to kind of like the situation that you find yourself in. But yeah, I wanted to defer to Greg to see if he had anything to add or anything to say to that.
So I would say that in terms of the maturity of the project from class, and that's just how you tell the story, is I only had this many weeks to do this. This was, the point of the class was X. We were able to accomplish this. you know, this was our goal, this was what we did, and look at how great it is. If it's not ready, as in you think you could have done better, well, you just need to suck that up and put it in your portfolio if you like it generally, because it will no project is ever really done. You know, it's only due. So you really want to make sure that you're not shorting yourself with oh, well, this project's not good enough or that project's not good enough. Like that's just like the negative talk in your head. If a project is terrible because the group didn't do well, I can honestly say in my 12 years at UB, 4 were in a condition that I wouldn't put in a portfolio from grad school. And even if it is terrible, what a great negative case study to show, look how terrible this went, and here's why. And you know, use it as a talking opportunity. And you can talk, or you can save the story of that project with for the, oh, what are some of your weaknesses? What are some things you can work, you know, those questions that happen in interviews. You're like, oh, well, there was this time I worked on this project with this one student and we just didn't see eye to eye. So I worked on communicating in the future better. So there's nothing, like I said, honestly, that I've seen that I wouldn't include, but you do have to get over the fear of, is this good enough? And that's why we're doing these kind of workshops, right? Is to like have people, because it's not the artifact, which I think is what Bethany or Stephanie said earlier. It's not the artifact, it's the story of the artifact. It should not, I mean, your case studies should not be pretty pictures, right? It should be like really messy, really like messy backstory graphics in terms of like, these were sketches we did, this was that we did, like the process stuff. So yeah, I would say, you know, get some self-confidence.
I think I've just been in the publishing paradigm for too long where like you have to edit and re-edit and then you finally submit the last thing after
Yeah,
you've
you
done all
can't
that
do
work.
that. There's literally, yeah, that's not going to happen. That doesn't even happen in this field.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
that's good. I
yeah.
think this has been a really great workshop. Thank you all.
Thank you for your great question. And thanks for your great answer, Greg.
I have a question. What do you think about making it for a web portfolio? Do you have thoughts about making it password protected if like you don't want to talk about your clients' stories publicly?
Yeah, that's a good question. Bethany, do you have any insights on that, or do you want me to
Oh, I
start
thought
off?
you might have something to share on that since you're working in the field. I know just from what I've learned is that you definitely want to protect the work if it's something your company doesn't want you to share. I've seen versions where people can like scrub the data or they like change the name so it's like not explicitly contributed to or attributed to their company. That can be risky. So I think to be safe, there's nothing wrong at all with just putting a password on it. But obviously you still want enough of your work to be accessible to potential employers. So yeah, Stephanie, do you have any advice about how to handle that?
Yeah, I think I personally would not include that on my website. Again, this is just me personally. I think I would probably just include that into my actual like presentation deck. And then I would do it as Bethany said and kind of just scrub all the information that ties back to the client or whatever the information is that you're not allowed to share. So that way you're still able to, present on the project and you kind of have that extra layer of security, knowing that, only a few select people are actually going to to see that project specifically.
Okay, thank you.
If it's a research kind of project and less of a design project, you can also talk in generalities in the case study about, keep referring to, like, if you worked for Black & Decker, you know, a major tool manufacturer, like just keep saying words like that, a major software development company, something like that, if it's along those lines. And again, if you're telling the story of the creation of something or the design process, you might actually get really far with just doing that. But I don't think a password protected site is a bad idea. And then you can also do something to the effect of, you know, hey, here's the very generic version. More information is available by contacting me. You know, we can talk more details.
Antoine, did you have a question?
Yes. So regarding the websites that you showed for potential digital portfolios, have you ever utilized or seen anyone utilize Google Sites for something of that nature? Recommendation, not recommendation?
I personally haven't. With all the research I did, that one, I don't remember it coming up. I don't know if Stephanie or Greg, if you guys have any familiarity with that.
I wouldn't use it as my top choice. You know, if you were going to make something, I would probably over Google Sites. You know, a lot of people associate that with K-12 schools, like that tool set. So maybe I would just use like WordPress or something, which is not on the list here.
I mean, you
I
can
mean,
use
listen,
WordPress.
yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of tools that are on the list here,
Yeah.
but this was kind of just like a starting point in case you haven't heard about some of these tools, so
Yeah,
or haven't
Yeah.
thought about using them in this way.
Yeah, these are probably the most user-friendly tools. I mean, Squarespace and Wix are the two I see the most often, with Webflow also being up there, but Webflow I know has a steeper learning curve. I think,
Yeah.
Stephanie, you used Webflow. I use Squarespace. I know UX Folio is a popular one, but it does have some constraints in terms of just how much you're able to do with it. It follows kind of a set template for the most part. And then Notion can be good, but also some constraints and a bit of it's said to be beginner friendly, but it also definitely has its own learning curve.
Also, you can use GitHub. Like if you're more of a technical person, like people will use GitHub to host a site. You can use the wiki feature, you know, that's in there to like make some stuff if that's the direction you want to go. And that's free and that will be there, I'm assuming, forever. So you have that for you as well. And then the other thing you have is space on excuse me, you have space, you know, at UBalt until you graduate. And you can put a web page there as well. But I honestly would just invest in your .com name, AntoineChambers.com, and then, you know, hook it to like a Squarespace or a WordPress or something.
Okay, cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah, our goal tonight was to have some time to jump into starting your case studies. And like Stephanie said, next week we want to do, or not next week, next session, we want to do a review, no matter what point you've reached, because we're all beginners. But just to have as much done as you can. I know we only have like 7 minutes left. And just so you guys know, we are planning on focusing more on the portfolio in general, and you know, maybe the next session and the following one as well. So I'm not sure what we want to do time-wise. Does anyone else have any questions at this point?
I had a quick question. Do you recommend making a PDF portfolio like along with the web one, like they align with each other? Because you were saying that you often need both.
Yeah, so it depends on the approach you want to take. If you do want to go ahead and have a website, just know that your PDF will be a slightly different version. So a website is going to be more of a shorter story, whereas the PDF will allow you to kind of go into more detail when you are actually presenting a case study to a hiring manager. Yeah, so they're not going to be like exact replicas of each other. Stephanie, I know you have probably more experience with that. So did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think I agree with, you know, what you just said. I think if I had to kind of go through my, you know, portfolio and case study building process again, I would definitely, as a researcher, I would definitely prioritize the PDF one first because, like we said in the presentation, that's what you're going to actually use in the room in the interview when you're doing your case study walkthrough. And so I would just prioritize that one first if possible. And then, yeah, if you have the time and you have the energy, great, go for the website. But I know it depends a little bit on, you know, a few factors like what industry you're going into or you're trying to break into. So
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Kimberly, I saw your hand go up.
yeah, and feel free to just shout out questions. Yeah.
I was just curious if there was, because you mentioned like the PDF version, is there a industry standard on like how many pages this should be or how in depth, like what's, you know, with resumes being like, you know, 1 page or something when it's scannable, what is scannable for something like this?
Yeah. So specifically for PDF, I don't think I've seen anything around, you know, a certain amount of pages. What I have seen is, you know, typically during the interview process, they'll give you about an hour to kind of go through your work. And usually like 45 minutes to 50 minutes is really just you like presenting with like 10-ish minutes for questions. And usually like within the 45 to 50 minutes of that hour that you're able to present, you want to focus on at least 2 projects, sometimes 3, depending on the length of your projects. So yeah, to kind of sum that up, I think what I've seen in the industry is that you're usually presenting 2 to 3 projects, and there's no set page amount or limit that I've seen.
I had another question.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Sarah.
definitely.
So when you're talking about the PDFs and the website, it made me think about how when you like apply for a job, typically you customize like the cover letter. And I didn't know if you had sort of like a master list of all the projects that you'd ever done and that where you cull it down to like 3 to 5 examples that are specifically geared toward the job that you're applying for. Or if you recommend just having like your 3 best projects and then you replace those whenever a new, better project gets put in there. Because I feel like you could do different approaches that way. Like, but I wanted to hear what y'all had done or what you had seen.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't know if I have enough experience to, quite frankly, to say that, oh, I have all of these projects that I can like pull from. From my experience, what I found is, you know, I kind of started out with the, you know, 3 or 4 projects that felt very confident about, and I felt was a really great way to showcase a lot of the different skills and attributes that I wanted hiring managers to notice. And then from there, from the experience that I've had over the past few years, as I'm kind of growing in my career, I'm kind of switching those projects out for the things that are most relevant, that kind of show like, hey, you know, I'm moving up from, you know, this junior level to a more, you know, mid researcher level. So, but I always feel like, you know, you should 100% present things that you're super passionate about and interested in, because that passion really just carries through. And you know, the interviewer or the hiring manager will be able to kind of see, you know, your personality and kind of see your drive if you're, you know, talking about projects that you're actually really interested and invested in. So if the choice is between, you know, choosing, you know, projects that, you know, show these skill sets or choosing things that are passionate, I'd probably say try to do a mix of both. But I think passion is something that we don't really talk about often, and I think it's definitely something that's really important to consider.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, of course.
Well, it is 8, so we are at time. If anyone does have any pressing questions, I do want to maybe allow for one more if there's time. Unless there are no questions. All right.
Thanks, guys. You did a great job.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about this just because, like I said, this was an uphill battle for me, and just happy to share what I've learned on that trudge up the
Yeah.
hill.
Same for different reasons, but same.
Yeah. So we do have kind of some goals for next time. We've already mentioned. There's a specific article that I think is really helpful if you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't really know where to start, and it kind of breaks it down into like 5 steps to like building out a case study, starting with just like writing an outline, writing your headlines, filling out the details, stuff like that. So I will make sure to include that. It's in this little link right here, which I was going to try to share, but we will make sure that everybody who registered for this gets the slides for this presentation, so that once we do have our next workshop, you guys will be ready to go. And just be on the lookout for an announcement about that. Should hopefully have that pinned down in the next week or so. We're trying to get some guest contributors who are already working in the field to provide feedback to you guys, because I know that's really helpful. So fingers crossed we can pull that off. And yeah, just stay tuned for that announcement and start working on your case study. Greg, Stephanie, any last words?
No, I think that's it. And feel free to like reach out to us on LinkedIn too. Like we're here to help support in any way possible. But looking forward to the next workshop.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it might be great if you guys try to pair up with people in your, if you see names in here that you either know from class or you know from somewhere else, or you don't know them, you want to reach out and say hello. It's not a bad idea to pair up and work on these as like portfolio buddies to kind of try to tackle these problems together with your own stuff. So it's kind of like a first draft, like a first critique, because you're working with someone else on it.
Yeah, that's actually great advice, Greg. And even just beyond the scope of this workshop series, like I know for me, it was really helpful to have like a weekly co-working session. I did that with a couple of fellow students when I was in the program, and it just helped with accountability and just like being able to bounce ideas off someone and just kind of commiserating, being in that same boat of trying to build a portfolio, because I know it is super stressful if you're in class, if you're working, like there's already a lot going on. Adding this to your plate, I know can feel overwhelming, and having that support and accountability is super helpful. So great advice, Greg.
Yeah, accountability is important.
Yeah.
Do a little bit every day. That's the other thing, is like, don't be like, you know what? It's Sunday, I'm going to knock out my portfolio. Like, one day just make the list and you're done for the day. Make the list and you're done for the day. And the next day be like, oh, well, what do I have from these different projects? And then you're done for the day, right? Like just a little bit.
Yeah. Great advice.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Have a great-
Well, thanks so much for being here, everyone. This has been
Thank you.
wonderful talking to you all, and hope you got a lot of value out of it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.